Hello. Wow, that was really fast. My name is unimportant right now. I used to be assistant to a private investigator who kept running into very unusual cases the world would never admit happened. Locked room cases were the norm for us, but I never wanted to be his assistant. There was another person here, who my boss reached out to for reasons unknown to me. But they are both gone, consumed by the House of the Seal. My boss had ventured into the house, knowing he would never return, and after 2 weeks, our letter arrived at the front door. I was right. This isn't just a house and a hound from who knows where. It is a seal, one of his seals. While that damn thing would stare at me, I read through the journals, and I found enough evidence to prove my theory. There have been other houses, and they have consumed 666 victims each. 665 victims of 665 seals. And I think that place you journeyed to, is what the world will turn into unless we seal the lock. You must get the new guy to volunteer to go in, or, you know what will happen. I look over at the new guy, as he reads through one of the child diaries. With a sigh, I walk over and the letter to him. He looks up at me confused but takes the letter. The diary he puts down is light blue. What does he mean about your journeys? He asks. Sitting down, I look at him. He seems to take this on board quite well, probably why my former boss, chose him. I am empathic, I can sense the emotions of other people. It is something I have always been able to do, pick up on when people were angry or what have you. I pull out my phone and use my speed dial. Hello, came the curt response. He has been lost. His final request was that no one enters the residence he notified you about 2 weeks ago. I stated coldly, before hanging up. Sorry, I have to follow his requests. I apologize while organizing my thoughts. Closing my eyes, I focus for a moment. About 4 years ago, on my first weekend trip, I was camping with some friends. While out there, we drank and had fun, on the first day, but when I woke up the next day, I wasn't with my friends. I can feel my mind drift back to the moment. Shaking my head, I continue, focusing my stare on the new guy. I looked around as best as I could, but there were no signs of them anywhere. And that was when I noticed. I was in the middle of the forest, and I couldn't hear anything. No background noise, no bird calls. Nothing. I couldn't even hear my own footsteps. When I tried to find a twig to snap, I noticed marks in the ground. Crouching close to them, I realized these were drag marks of someone clawing at the ground as they were dragged by their feet. Reaching out, I got a surge of emotions. Panic. Fear. Terror. It was like being assaulted by a foul stench. I lost my balance and toppled forward, and my hand touched the drag marks. I notice my hands are shaking, and I tried to relax to get them to stop. When my hand touched them, I saw what happened from the perspective of the victim. They were being dragged, and when they looked away, they saw what little was left of their friends. I saw flashes of memory. The party they were having, the fun. Then they noticed a friend was missing. While I normally do not get affected by emotion, through discipline and an iron will, recounting these experiences make it hit harder than normal. I take a couple of breaths to steady myself again. I stood up and looked around. Again, no sound, but that sense of being watched by something felt more apparent. So there I was all alone in a forest I was not familiar with, no supplies, and whatever killed at least 4 people were likely still in the area. I tried to see any drag marks to try and figure out if it attacked from a particular angle. I felt something light drop onto my shoulder. Looking up, I saw it. It looked like a werewolf in humanoid form, with its canine head. Empty, hungry eyes stared at me, while that thing smiled at me. Ever see a wolf smile? Not grin, but full-on Joker-type smile. Creepy on some humans, terrifying on that thing. I ran. It is hard to focus on remaining calm, when I can see the dog thing from the seal house, sitting in the doorway behind the new guy. It looks like a dog but perpetually melting. Its skin seems to slide off the bones, but never actually move. Its mouth is misshapen as half the jaw seems to be in a perpetual state of melting, as the flesh on its bones. It was staring at the new guy, who hasn't noticed it yet. It looks worried. Running through a forest you don't know, being chased by a thing that lives there. I was expecting to die. After some distance, I emerge over some invisible threshold which caused me to hear the screams. Men, women, children. But there was something off. It is like listening to a song on repeat. Eventually, you can pinpoint the weak spots. But for these screams, they sounded older than what they were. Like, instead of fresh screams, it was like a persistent echo or something. There was something surreal about it. I wouldn't realize what it was until I made my way out of the forest. I grab a drink of water before resuming my experience. I think it liked to chase me. The thing bounded through the trees like a bullet, but I didn't care. My focus was on getting out. When I did leave the tree line and looked back, I could feel the forest itself glare at me. Like it was angry I escaped. I noticed that the screams emanating from within were different somehow. I looked around where I stood, and I saw vehicles, but as I got closer to them, taking a sip, I continued. My friends found me 3 days later, standing at the edge of the parking area where we parked the car. I looked pale, and my feet were bleeding. I was only in pants. No idea what happened to the rest of my clothes. I went to a couple of shrinks, but I refrained from telling them what actually happened to me. That would not be the last trip I took. After my 6th sojourn, our mutual friend found me, and I could tell when I looked at him that he had seen things. So, he was the first person I told the truth to. We came up with theories based on my observations on other trips, but that was a shock. I gesture to the letter. From what I saw, imagine every horror story, every scary story, campfire ghost story, urban legend, creepypasta were real. What sort of world would that be like? He looked at the letter, and back to me. Do you really think that could happen here? The new guy asks softly. He did. He willingly went into that place to find out the truth, or the best guess he could make. I trust that man with my life. I answer. Promise me something. He looks at me, earnestly. You know about my experiences on Reddit. Tell your stories to them. Warn them. Educate them. Of course. I will start with the very first case I worked with our mutual friend. I say as I pick up the diary. A missing child case? You didn't read the first page, did you? I just opened to a random page. He shrugged. He stood up and looked around. Will you walk with me there? I nod and put the diary on top of the filing cabinet. Locking up, I nod to him and we set off. He doesn't seem to notice, but that dog thing is following us, head low, and what I think is its tail droops as well. Getting closer to the house, I notice a little girl come racing from the direction we are heading to, and she wraps her arms around his leg. I was too shocked to take details in at first, but Imagine what a person would look like if they were used as a chew toy, and not allowed to die. As we get closer, another person would emerge, their body in the same state as the girls, and they would try to weigh down the new guy. Eventually, 663 people later, he is still making steady progress, but it is very slow. He crosses the threshold, and I can actually feel the howl of the hound thing. And in a blink, the house and the dog house are gone.